Hi, John. Chris Stevenson here. Hello. How are you? I'm going to just quickly introduce you. Not that you need much introduction, but I'm going to quickly do so. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much everybody for staying with us for everything on going today after this session. We now have John Rosenow. I expect a spontaneous cheer. Thank you. John, before you begin, we've got Matthew from Baines here with us today, and he was just telling us how Jacob Rees-Mogg was waxing lyrical about the opportunity for hydrogen as a heating fuel, and I'm sure you will echo his views during your presentation. So over to you.
Thank you. You want me to start?
Yeah, please, yeah.
Excellent. Well, I'm not going to mention hydrogen in my talk, I'm afraid. I will just talk about heat pumps if I'm allowed to. Right, I get a lot of feedback. I hope you can hear me all right. Yes.
Oh, it's gone.
I'm sharing my screen now, Stephen. I hope you can see it.
Yep, that's fine.
Okay, ready to go?
Yep.
Okay, so I was going to talk to you about kind of global heat pump market trends and a little bit about UK policy in my talk. It's a shame I can't be there with you. I would have loved to attend the dinner later on in particular, but I've got so many other commitments right now that it's difficult for me to make the time. I'm going to start actually with a recent holiday picture. This is a pub and a hotel in a place called Trentishall in Devon, North Devon. And we went there for our Easter vacation. And I just noticed that there were some construction works going on. In the bottom right corner, you can see why. And I thought I'd share that for one particular reason. We often hear that old buildings can't have heat pumps. I don't know how many times I have seen comments like that on my social media feed and in the media. This pub was built in 1823. It's a National Trust property, and as you can see on the sign there, they're just installing, and it should now be completed, a ground source heat pump to heat the entire building. And there's no backup, it's just the heat pump. So that's something I just came across. I thought I'd share it. We see more and more of these kinds of projects across the country and also in other places around the world. And clearly, heat pumps do also work in old buildings, even an old listed building like this one. Anyway, I wanted to really talk to you about sort of two distinct issues. One is kind of a global perspective on heat pumps, and then the UK. And just do a bit of context setting first, if I may. And as you all know, we are currently in the middle of a perfect storm. We have three crises intertwined. We have the climate crisis. We had the most severe heat wave, as you all know, this summer, not just in the UK, but all over Europe. I had, I think in Oxford on my street, 39.5 degrees centigrade in July. So the urgency of addressing that and reducing emissions has never been greater. The second crisis is, as you all know, is the energy price crisis. Gas prices are still, the last time I checked on Monday, 10 times above pre-pandemic levels. And that's not going to come down anytime soon. It will decline a little bit, forecasts say, but prices will remain high for both gas and oil. And then the third crisis is the supply crisis. Real concerns about, do we get enough energy into Europe, into the UK to survive the winter? So those three things, I think, all highlight the importance of moving away from fossil fuel heating to technologies such as heat pumps, which creates, I think, a great opportunity for the wrong reasons, but it's a great opportunity for companies, organizations working in the heat pump space. We're seeing that when we look at global level. I'm going to talk about some of the numbers in a minute. But before I do that, I just wanted to use recent data that came out, which I thought, again, was interesting to share. A lot of the discussion about decarbonization tends to be on the tip of the iceberg on electricity, which is about 17% of global final energy use. The most important part, though, is heating and cooling, but mainly heating in industry, but largely buildings. Then there's also transport, and that's also the part that needs most of the work. Electricity, we've actually done relatively well, as you can see on this slide, which shows you, this is data from REN 21 released earlier this year, shows you the share of renewable energy in each sector. When you start on the right-hand side for power, that's 28% globally. So not bad, and that's improving rapidly in some places now more than 50%. Denmark, for example, last year was more than 50% renewables. But transport is already doing a lot worse, only 3.7%, and heating and cooling just a bit more than 10%. And most of that is biomass currently. It's not electricity from renewables or ambient heat. So a lot more work to be done there. And we also see a bit of a stagnation, really, when you look at the bottom graph with the different lines there, the orange line representing heating and cooling, some improvement, but just not fast enough, and significant work remains to be done. However, there are some signs for optimism, and I want to just share some recent work that we published earlier this year. I think it came out at the end of August in the journal Nature Energy. And we looked at the heat pump market in 2021 across the world. And I just wanted to share some highlights from that. I'm not going to go into much detail here, given the time constraints. So one thing we found is that when you look at where we actually are in terms of heat pump trends up until 2020, yeah, there is growth globally in the heat pump market. We used to have about 100 million units installed in 2010, and that is all ground source, air source, or any other type of heat pump. And that has increased to about 180 million by 2020. So some growth there, that's good. But if we just extrapolate that growth curve, that's the orange line here, to 2030, and compare that to where we need to be according to the International Energy Agency, you see a very significant gap here. We're only going to get there, about a third of the way, maybe a little bit more, but we need to really accelerate the deployment rate if we wanted to meet those very ambitious goals to meet net zero. So that's kind of the starting point. Now the good news, 2021 was a great year for heat pumps around the world. And this is a fact that Time magazine published subsequently based on our article. Starting at the top are the countries with the highest growth rate, and then at the bottom, the ones with the lowest growth rate. You can see top is Poland. Who would have thought, right? Poland is usually seen as a climate laggard, not as a leader. But in Poland, 72% growth rate, which is absolutely phenomenal. Italy, 65%, and then a number of other countries where there's been more than a third increase in market growth, which is also very, very impressive. Well, a number of things really, but partly it has to do with government incentives, partly with regulation phasing out old coal heating systems, but now increasingly also the high cost of gas and energy security concerns. So Poland really has been a leader in 2021. The UK, a bit further down, you have to look, you can see the UK 17% growth, modest improvement, but certainly not fast enough to meet the 600,000 units to be installed per year by 2028. Government. We see movement, and this is record growth in many countries. We haven't seen that before at this scale. That's the last one I wanted to highlight, 35% growth, which is very significant. It's probably now actually more than 2 million units installed, 21 in Europe. There has been more recent data from the European Heat Pump Association released recently. Here's one example, just to show you kind of what this looks like. This is the Dutch heat pump market in more recent data that was released just a few weeks ago. And you can see, and sorry for the language here, this is just a straight screenshot from the Dutch website that has this data, but it's essentially number of units per year that you see here on this graph. It's not cumulative, it's total installations per year. And, the Netherlands has a population of, I think, about 15 million. Just in context, more than 300,000 units installed in a single year in 2021. But what's more impressive is the trajectory, 500% market growth over just 3 years. That is is absolutely astonishing, really. Why is it happening? Well, the Netherlands have decided and announced that after 2026, you can no longer install a standalone fossil fuel heating system. You can no longer have just a gas boiler or an oil boiler. It needs to be at least a hybrid system. But what happens in reality is most of them are standalone heat pumps now. A lot of air source. I know you want that to be ground source, but it's a lot of air source heat pumps in the Netherlands. But it just shows the importance of policy, really, in moving away from fossil fuel heating. In 2022, and apologies for the poor quality of the graph, this is the best I could get from the European Heat Pump Association. It's going to be another record-breaking year. Poland forecasted here, again, with very significant growth figures, more than 100%. Finland doing very well indeed, 80% growth. So you just see that it's going to continue in many places. I don't know the numbers for the UK yet. I haven't seen the latest from the MCS and others. But there's also been some modest growth, I believe, that is optimistic. Again, looking at Poland here, just in the first half of this year, based on those numbers, you see a doubling of the market. So very significant growth just based on those figures, potentially going to an even higher degree. So that's all very positive. You can see here actually brine water. I think that's ground source in the Polish terminology. It's a relatively small share. It used to be a much higher share in the past. So a lot of this air source, and maybe we can talk about why that is or how that could be changed in the Q&A. The German market, and this is Fiesmann announcing an investment of 1 billion euros in May, is expanding absolutely rapidly. There's huge investments. Again, this is driven by policy. The German government decided that by 2024, all new heating systems, whether that's in new buildings or existing buildings, all new heating systems that get installed need to run at least on 65% renewable energy. And most experts and the market also expect that will be mainly heat pumps, the vast majority. Not all of it. There will be some biopellet boilers, maybe some biogas, and of course district heating will still play a role, but the vast majority will be heat pumps. And you now see companies like Fiesmann, which traditionally have made and still make a lot of fossil fuel heating systems, and have also made a strong case for hydrogen in the past, really investing serious money in scaling up manufacturing capacity. And Fiesmann make both ground source and air source heat pumps, as you know. So they are playing in both market segments. What happens in the UK? And that's the last part of my presentation. Well, I'm afraid right now, not so much. When I looked at the energy security strategy that was published in April, I think, and also the recent announcement that came out of government in response to the energy price crisis, I haven't seen anything that fundamentally changes the policy landscape yet. So it's a big gap, and UK needs to do a lot better, can do a lot better, in my view. And I really hope that the new government is going to take another look at heat pumps. I don't want to really talk about us too much, the boiler upgrade scheme. I'm sure you had plenty of discussions already, why that's going slow, why we're not seeing more of that. I know that there are concerns about the level of support for ground source in particular, and other concerns too. I really would have hoped that to be more successful, and maybe that will still happen, but there's significant gap in terms of other policies that can support heat pump uptake in addition to the bus scheme. One thing in particular that has changed really that I wanted to highlight in the UK, and this is not because of policy, it's really because of the rising costs of gas, is the economic case in terms of the running costs. So this graphic shows you the running costs per year for a typical household using about 12,000 kilowatt hours of gas, and if you had a gas boiler with a 85% efficiency or 92% efficiency, that indicates the running costs here. That those are the yellow and green lines. And the heat pump with a different coefficient of performance is plotted against that. And you can see that once you reach seasonal coefficient of performance of around 2.8, depending on the kind of reference fossil fuel system, you break even in terms of the running costs. This is not taking into account the upfront costs, just the running costs. And of course, ground source heat pumps, we would hope, sit to the very far right of this graphic, maybe even further off the scale, exceeding the S-cup of 4, and certainly start to beat gas boilers very, very easily. I've done similar analysis for oil, which looks very positive too. So there is a much better economic case now because of the changes in energy prices. Even though electricity prices, this is based on the Ofgem price cap, this graphic, are now 52 pence per kilowatt hour for residential customers. There's still a better case for heat pumps, given that gas prices are up so much more than electricity in percentage terms. So that's an opportunity, I think, for heat pumps to use some of those savings to then pay for the upfront cost. And hopefully, with policy reform going forward, we can maintain that economic advantage for heat pumps. But at the moment, and sorry for the messy graphic, I will explain this, heating fuels are still very unevenly priced, not just in the UK, but also across Europe. This is some work we published in June this year, and we looked at the levels of taxation and levies applied to different heating fuels compared to their environmental externalities. And for the non-economists among you, externalities are things like carbon, climate damage caused by carbon emissions, air pollution, etc. And we find that for Germany, UK, Spain, Italy, and Belgium, in all cases, electricity is overtaxed and too many levies are being applied compared to the externalities, whereas for gas and oil, it's the opposite, they're undertaxed. And that distorts the market in a way that it doesn't create a level playing field and is not helpful. Has been offset to some degree, as I said before, by rising gas prices. But this is really something the government has committed to changing. It has been, I think, confirmed again earlier this year in different government documents, but we haven't seen that yet. We haven't seen any specific steps yet, other than putting a moratorium on eco, which is now being paid for through the energy, through the public budget. But that's not really a shift from a more long-term shift, and that really needs to happen, in my view. Other countries have done that. The Netherlands, for example, here's an example of tax reform that actually changed the economics of heat pumps. And this is taking into account all of the costs, not just the running costs. It's the total cost of ownership, so upfront cost and running cost. And the situation before the tax reform was that heat pumps were more expensive than a gas boiler. The heat pumps here in green, gas boiler in gray. And after the tax reform, heat pumps were slightly better compared to gas boilers, taking into account all of the costs. Other countries like Denmark have done the same thing. I could give you more examples, but essentially we see now that this can be addressed, has been addressed, and the UK could do the same thing and really make a much stronger case economically for heat pumps. That's it, really. I look forward to your questions and any comments you might have. I hope that was stimulating and gave you some interesting perspectives from a sort of global perspective. I'm looking forward to maybe getting some questions and some comments. Thank you.
Any questions?
Do you have any recommendations on exactly how a mechanism would work for rebalancing those gas and electricity prices? Is it just taking off the carbon tax, or is there more?
Yeah, there's a number of options, and one option would be to just apply the levies in a fairer way on a carbon intensity factor, across all of the fuels. So gas and oil would pay their fair share. Of course, that's politically difficult right now to add further costs to gas bills. So the second option is actually what the UK government has done in effect, is to shift the levies from electricity onto general taxation, but it's only a moratorium, right? It's a suspension of those levies for a short period of time. A country that has done that permanently is Germany. They decided earlier this year to shift all of the levies from electricity bills into general taxation, and that's permanent, and that lowered electricity costs quite significantly. And then a third option that is also available is to exempt the electricity used by heat pumps. That's what Denmark has done. So if you have a ground source heat pump, there would be an allowance made for the electricity you use as a household or as a business, and you don't have to pay any levies or lower taxes on the share of electricity used for heating. So that's a more pragmatic approach, perhaps, because it doesn't require these vast reforms of taxes and levies. It really just exempts people with heat pumps, and that means the impact on the treasury, the impact on the levy framework are very modest, at least initially, when fewer heat pumps are being deployed. At some point, when there's a lot of heat pumps in the market, then that becomes a bit of a problem. But at the beginning, at least, it isn't, and that's what Denmark has done to encourage heat pump uptake.
Thank you. John,
John, it's Dirk Van here. I'm interested to know how your organisation is connecting with our government and what influence you feel you have compared to the oil and gas lobbyists who have millions of pounds over decades with very high profile lobbyists in Parliament.
Gosh, that's a highly politically charged question, and I'm going to try to answer that diplomatically. No, we have worked well with BASE and the CCC in the past, and had exchanges with them and shared ideas. And I think they are interested in hearing from organizations like ours and from others, what could be done, what could be good reforms, what are other countries doing. I have not, I don't know the ins and outs of lobbyists from the fossil fuel industry, but there has been a report published, I think, recently that suggested there were about 120 lobbyists making the case for hydrogen in Parliament. I can't confirm that. I do not know, but there is clearly a strong push in the UK. But I hope that some of the analysis that was shared earlier this week on hydrogen that we published maybe changes the debate a little bit. But I'm not sure whether you're aware of it, but there was a review that we did, and we found there's not a single independent study in the world published in the last 4 years that concludes that hydrogen for heating is preferable.
We have a question from our new honorary life member, Robin Curtis.
Hi, James. Fantastic stuff again. I'm not sure you were able to hear Matthew's presentation earlier on, but one of the things that he had some interesting work, which was to show the impact of the improvement. We're biased about ground source, but interestingly, he had done some work to show the impact of the improved COP on the grid and the distribution system. And when you think about what it must have cost government to move from non-condensing boilers to gas condensing boilers, which is possibly, I don't know, offering maybe a theoretical 10% improvement, and maybe turned out to be a few percent improvement actually. It may be something worth putting some mileage into to just understand how big, when you start talking about millions of heat pumps, then those differences in COP become very significant. It's not an issue maybe at the moment, I can understand that, but going down the line, we maybe should be taking account of it.
There were 2 points, I think, Robin. And one was the impact on the grid from heat pumps and the need to lower inefficiency and have a higher coefficient of performance. And I think that can be achieved at least in 2 ways. One, of course, is to have highly efficient heat pumps, and ground source heat pumps have an advantage there, as you all know. But I think also, and this is something I've just talked to on the radio yesterday, on Radio 4, energy efficiency. It's much easier to have high efficiency heat pumps in buildings that are well insulated. It just makes the job easier and lowers the total impact on the grid too. So I think we better in doing that. But there was, I think you had a second point on the non-condensing issue of condensing boilers, which I think is now being raised by several people, including Mike Liebreich, and also who has a big following and people pay attention to that. That's good. I haven't seen anything yet coming out of government that provides even just advice to people saying you could do this and here's how you would do it. The Heating Hub, I think, have done a bit of work in that space, and that's great. Again, I often look to other places, see what they do. There's now a mandate that was announced, and I haven't seen the detail of that yet, but the German government announced a mandate that every household has to do it. They have to go through an assessment to see whether the flow temperatures could be lowered to make sure the efficiencies are being achieved that are being specified by the manufacturers. And that would, I don't know how they're going to roll that out, who is going to be mandated, will there be installers, how they're going to enforce that, but that's been announced, I think, last week. So in other places, it's becoming quite a big thing, this issue of low flow temperatures and optimizing heating systems, which I think is an important inroad for heat pumps, because this whole debate, in my view, about heat pumps can't heat buildings of a certain type is really tied to flow temperatures. And if condensing boilers were condensing, they would be operating at lower flow temperatures too. And I think that the debate is somewhat meaningless, I believe, because it really is based on the fact that we run fossil fuel heating systems in a very inefficient manner.
Okay, John, just wanted to say on behalf of all the audience, thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you so much for all your hard work. John Rosenow.
Before you go,
So we have